You are worthless." The words echoed through the grand hall, and Alara felt each syllable like a physical blow. Lady Seraphina stood at the top of the marble staircase, her crimson gown flowing behind her like spilled blood, her perfect face twisted into an expression of aristocratic disgust. A wolfless servant. That is what you are, and that is all you will ever be. The assembled nobility of the Silver Moon Kingdom watched in silence, some with pity, most with the kind of fascination people reserve for watching something broken. Alara kept her eyes down, her hands clutching the silver tray she had been carrying when Seraphina had deliberately stepped into her path, forcing this public confrontation. 5 years. 5 years since the night of her 16th birthday, when her wolf should have emerged, when she should have felt the ancient power of her kind surge through her veins and claim her place in the pack. Instead, there had been nothing. Just silence. Just the horrifying realization that she was different, damaged, less than everyone around her. Her parents had wept. The pack elders had examined her with clinical detachment, poking and prodding as if she were a curiosity rather than a person. And then the whispers had started. Wolfless, broken, cursed. Within a month, her family had sent her to work at the palace, unable to bear the shame of having a defective daughter. "My lady, please." Alara's voice was barely a whisper, but in the vast silence of the hall, it carried. "I did not mean to disturb your path. I will clean the wine immediately." The red liquid spread across the pristine white marble, where Seraphina had knocked the tray from Alara's hands, looking like a wound against the pale stone. Seraphina descended 3 steps, her movements predatory and precise. She was everything Alara was not. Beautiful, powerful, noble. Her wolf was legendary, a creature of silver and shadow that had earned her the title of the North's Jewel before she had even turned 20. Now, at 25, she was the most sought-after unmated female in all the kingdoms, and everyone knew she would soon be named queen. The King Alpha himself had chosen her, or so the rumors said. The official announcement was expected any day now. "You will clean it with your bare hands," Seraphina said, her voice carrying the unmistakable ring of command of someone who had never been denied anything in her entire life. "On your knees, so that everyone here can see exactly what you are." The crowd shifted, uncomfortable now. This was more than the casual cruelty of the nobility toward servants. This was personal, vindictive, but no one spoke. No one would dare contradict Seraphina, not when she was so close to the throne. Alara felt her face burn with humiliation, but she lowered herself to her knees anyway. What choice did she have? She was nothing here. Less than nothing. Her fingers touched the cold marble, and she began to wipe at the wine with the sleeve of her simple gray dress. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. She had learned long ago that tears only made things worse, that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. How pathetic! Seraphina's voice dripped with contempt. "Tell me, girl, do you ever wonder what it feels like? To have a wolf? To feel the power running through your veins? To know you belong?" Each question was a knife, precisely placed to cause maximum damage. Alara did wonder. Every single day. What it would feel like to transform, to run under the moon with the pack, to be whole instead of this fractured, incomplete thing she had become. She wondered if the emptiness inside her would ever be filled, or if she was doomed to feel this hollow ache for the rest of her life. "I imagine it must be unbearable," Seraphina continued, circling Alara like a predator toying with wounded prey. "To be surrounded by greatness and know you will never touch it. To serve those who have what you can only dream of. Does it eat at you, this knowledge of your own inadequacy? That is enough." The voice cut through the hall like a blade through silk, deep and resonant with absolute authority. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. and every person present felt the unmistakable weight of true alpha power pressing down on them. Alara's head snapped up, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. King Alpha Matthias stood in the doorway of the great hall, and the sight of him stole what little breath she had left. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller just by entering them. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of molten amber, burning with an intensity that made grown warriors look away. He wore simple black clothing, no crown, no royal regalia, because he did not need such things to proclaim his status. Everyone in the kingdom knew who he was. Everyone in all the kingdoms knew. He was not just an alpha. He was the Alpha King, ruler of the 7 werewolf territories, the most powerful shifter alive. And he was staring directly at Alara, with an expression she could not begin to interpret. Seraphina's confidence faltered for just a moment, before she recovered, smoothing her features into a gracious smile. "My king, I was simply correcting a servant who had caused an accident. Nothing that requires your attention." Matthias moved into the room with fluid grace, his footsteps silent. On the marble floor, despite his size, the crowd parted before him like water, everyone bowing deeply as he passed. His eyes never left Alara's face, and she found she could not look away, could not even breathe properly under the weight of that golden gaze. "An accident," he repeated, his voice carefully neutral. "Is that what you call deliberate humiliation, Seraphina?" The temperature dropped another few degrees, using her name, not her title. The insult was subtle but unmistakable, and color flooded Seraphina's perfect cheeks. "I merely sought to maintain proper decorum, Your Majesty. Servants must know their place." Matthias stopped 3 feet from where Alara still knelt on the floor, her hands stained red from the wine. He looked down at her, and she felt something shift in the air between them, something electric and strange that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Stand up," he said, and it was not a command but an invitation, spoken with unexpected gentleness. Alara scrambled to her feet, painfully aware of her stained dress, her disheveled hair, the wine on her hands. Next to Seraphina's perfection, she must look like exactly what she was. Nothing. No one. "What is your name?" Matthias asked, and the question surprised her so much that she almost forgot to answer. "Alara, Your Majesty." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, barely more than a whisper. "Alara," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables, testing them. "How long have you worked in the palace, Alara?" Why was he asking her this? Why was he even speaking to her? Kings did not notice servants, especially not worthless, wolfless servants who spent their days scrubbing floors and trying to be invisible. 5 years, Your Majesty." She could feel Seraphina's fury radiating from across the space between them, could sense the confusion and speculation rippling through the watching crowd. This was not normal. Nothing about this was normal. Matthias tilted his head slightly, studying her with those burning amber eyes, and Alara had the strangest sensation that he was seeing something others could not, looking past her plain exterior to something deeper. 5 years, he murmured. "And in those 5 years, has anyone ever asked you why you have no wolf?" The question struck her like a physical blow. No one asked about it. Everyone knew. Everyone pitied or despised her for it. But no one actually asked, as if speaking it aloud might somehow contaminate them with her deficiency. "I do not know why, Your Majesty," she said, and the honesty of it ached. "I wish I did." Something flickered in his expression, something that might have been recognition or understanding. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and touched 2 fingers to the pulse point at her wrist. The contact was brief, barely a second, but the effect was instantaneous and devastating. Power surged through Alara's body like lightning, hot and overwhelming and utterly foreign. She gasped, her knees buckling, and would have fallen if Matthias had not caught her arm, steadying her with a grip that was gentle despite his obvious strength. "Interesting," he said softly, and there was something almost dangerous in his tone now, something that made her very aware that for all his courtesy, he was the most lethal predator in the room. "Very interesting indeed." He released her and turned to face Serafina, who had gone pale beneath her artfully applied cosmetics. "The ritual of the blood moon is tonight," Matthias said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "All unmated wolves of age are required to attend. That includes servants. See that Alara is provided with appropriate attire." Serafina's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean to include a wolfless servant in the sacred ritual. It is unprecedented. It is inappropriate." "I am the king," Matthias said with quiet finality. "I decide what is appropriate." He looked at Alara one more time, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "I will see you tonight, Alara." Then he was gone, striding from the hall with the same commanding presence he had brought with him, leaving chaos in his wake. The moment he disappeared from sight, the whispers erupted like a dam breaking. Alara stood frozen in the center of it all, her wrist still tingling where he had touched her, her mind reeling from what had just happened. Serafina descended the remaining steps with deliberate slowness, and when she reached Alara, she leaned in close enough that only Alara could hear her words. "Whatever game you think you are playing, little mouse, it will end badly for you. The king is mine. He has always been mine, and I will destroy anyone who tries to take what belongs to me." The threat was clear, but Alara barely heard it. All she could think about was the sensation of power that had flooded through her when Matthias touched her skin, the impossible feeling that something inside her, something she had thought was dead or absent, had stirred in response to his presence. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The hours between the confrontation in the Great Hall and the ritual of the blood moon passed in a blur of confusion and anxiety. Alara was taken from her servants' quarters by two stern-faced attendants who looked at her with barely concealed suspicion and led to a bathing chamber she had only ever cleaned, never used. They scrubbed her skin until it glowed pink, washed her hair with scented oils that smelled of jasmine and moonflower, and dressed her in a gown of deep midnight blue that fit her better than anything she had ever worn. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the young woman staring back at her. Without the shapeless gray servant's dress, without her hair pulled back in a severe bun, she looked almost pretty. Not beautiful like Serafina, never that, but there was a softness to her features that the harsh realities of her life had hidden. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her eyes, which she had always thought were a plain brown, seemed to hold flecks of gold in the lamplight. "The king has lost his mind," one of the attendants muttered to the other as they worked. "Inviting a wolfless girl to the blood moon ritual. It is sacrilege." "Hush," the other one hissed. "Do you want to be reported for treason? We do as the king commands." Alara said nothing. What could she say? She did not understand what was happening any more than they did. The blood moon ritual was sacred, a ceremony held once every 5 years when the moon turned red in the sky and the veil between the mortal world and the ancient spirit realm grew thin. It was during this ritual that the strongest wolves could find their true mates, their destined partners, whose souls called to theirs across the metaphysical bonds that connected all shifters. Alara had never attended before. There had been no point. How could she find a mate when she had no wolf to call to another? Yet here she was, being prepared as if she belonged among the gathered elite of the kingdom. When the attendants finished and stepped back to survey their work, one of them grudgingly admitted, "You look presentable at least. Try not to embarrass the king with your presence." Alara was led through corridors she had walked 1,000 times as a servant, but now traversed as something else, something she could not quite name. Other wolves heading to the ritual stared at her, whispered behind their hands, some with curiosity, others with outright hostility. The ritual grounds were located in a sacred grove at the edge of the palace lands, a circular clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees, whose branches seemed to reach toward the sky like supplicating hands. Torches burned at intervals around the perimeter, casting dancing shadows across the gathered wolves who stood in careful hierarchy. The most powerful alphas and their families occupied the inner circles, while lesser wolves stood toward the outer edges. Alara was uncertain where she belonged, if she belonged anywhere, until a palace guard gestured her toward a spot near the middle. Not with the servants, but not with the nobility either. A space between, undefined, and uncomfortable. Seraphina stood in the inner circle, of course, radiant in a gown of silver that seemed to capture and reflect the torchlight. She was surrounded by her family and admirers, holding court as if she were already queen. When her eyes found Alara across the clearing, they narrowed with barely suppressed rage. The other nobles followed her gaze, and Alara felt the weight of their judgment like physical pressure. She wanted to run, to flee back to her small room and forget this night had ever happened. But before she could move, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. King Alpha Matthias had arrived. He entered the clearing from the north, flanked by his Beta and Gamma, his most trusted advisors. He wore ceremonial robes of deep black embroidered with silver thread that formed the symbols of his lineage, ancient runes that predated written language. On his head sat the crown of the Alpha King, a circlet of dark metal inlaid with a single blood-red stone that was said to contain a drop of the first Alpha's blood. He looked every inch the king, powerful and untouchable, and Alara felt foolish for thinking that what had happened in the Great Hall meant anything at all. He had noticed her for a moment, perhaps out of pity or curiosity, but now he would fulfill his duty to his kingdom and choose Seraphina as his mate, as everyone expected. The ritual began with the eldest pack members calling upon the old spirits, asking for their blessing and guidance. Smoke from mind. Sacred herbs filled the air, thick and cloying, making Alara's head swim. The moon rose higher, and as it climbed toward its zenith, it began to change. The white light shifted, taking on a reddish hue that grew deeper with each passing moment. Blood, moon. The crowd murmured in awe and reverence as the moon completed its transformation, bathing the clearing in crimson light. Tonight, we honor the old ways. Matthias's voice rang out, clear and commanding. Tonight, the bonds between souls become visible to those with eyes to see. Tonight, destiny makes itself known. He stepped into the center of the circle, and Alara felt her breath catch. This was it. The moment when he would claim his mate, when he would choose Seraphina and cement the political alliance that everyone had expected for years. Seraphina stepped forward without being called, confident and graceful, her smile radiant. She knew what was coming. Everyone knew. "My king," she said, her voice carrying just the right amount of reverence mixed with intimate familiarity. "I have waited for this night since I was old enough to understand what it meant. I offer myself to you as your mate, your queen, your partner in ruling these lands." The crowd held its collective breath. Matthias looked at Seraphina for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, and his words shattered the expected narrative like glass. "I thank you for your offer, Lady Seraphina, but you are not my mate." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop, as if nature itself was shocked by what had just occurred. Seraphina's face went white, then red, then white again. "What?" The word came out strangled, barely audible. "But, my lord, we have an understanding. Our families have agreed. The contracts have been drawn up." Matthias's expression was not unkind, but it was inflexible. I am bound by laws older than any contract, Seraphina. I am bound by the mate bond, and you are not my destined partner. He turned away from her, his eyes scanning the crowd, and Alara felt her heart begin to hammer in her chest, because his gaze was moving systematically, searching, and she knew with sudden, terrifying certainty what he was searching for. Who he was searching for. No, it was not possible. She was wolfless. She could not be anyone's mate, least of all the Alpha King's. But Matthias's eyes found hers across the clearing, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. He began to walk toward her, each step deliberate and purposeful, and the crowd parted before him in shocked silence. Alara could not move, could not breathe, could only stand frozen as the most powerful man in all the kingdoms approached her with an intensity that made her knees weak. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the scent of pine and smoke and something wild that called to a part of her she had not known existed. Ilara, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, like a promise. Do you feel it? She did not know what he meant. And then suddenly she did, because there it was, that same surge of power she had felt when he touched her in the hall, but stronger now, amplified by the blood moon and the sacred space and the ancient magic that thrummed through the air. It was not just power. It was recognition. It was coming home to a place she had never been. It was finding something she had not known she was missing. I do not understand, she whispered, and tears were streaming down her face now, hot and unchecked. I have no wolf. I cannot be anyone's mate. Matthias reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses she could feel on his palms. You have a wolf, Ilara. I can feel her. She is there, sleeping, waiting, and she is mine. No. Seraphina's scream cut through the moment like a knife. She stood in the center of the circle, her composure completely shattered, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. This cannot be happening. She is nothing. A servant, wolfless, broken. You cannot choose her over me. Matthias did not even turn to look at her. His eyes remained locked on Ilara's face, seeing nothing and no one else. I do not choose her, Seraphina. The moon chooses. Destiny chooses. And I will not fight against what the universe has decreed. He released Ilara's face and turned to address the assembled crowd, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Ilara is my mate, my true mate, and I claim her before the blood moon, before the spirits of our ancestors, before all of you as witnesses. The formal words of claiming sent a ripple of power through the clearing so strong that several of the weaker wolves actually stumbled. Ilara felt it wash over her, through her, claiming her on a level far deeper than words. The mate bond, forging itself between them with links of power and destiny that could never be broken. And in that moment, something inside her woke up. It started as a warmth in her chest, a gentle heat that spread outward through her limbs. Then the warmth became fire, became a conflagration that burned away everything she thought she knew about herself. She gasped, doubling over as power unlike anything she had ever imagined flooded her system. It felt like every cell in her body was being rewritten, reconfigured, awakened from a long sleep. Images flashed through her mind, too fast to fully process. White wolves, running under a moon so bright it hurt to see. A woman with eyes like molten silver standing before an altar of stone. Ancient words in a language she should not understand, but somehow did. Power. So much power that it frightened her. Ilara. Matthias's voice anchored her, pulled her back from the edge of being lost in the visions. His hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her as her body shook with the force of what was happening to her. Breathe. Just breathe. Let it happen. Do not fight. It. She tried to follow his instructions, tried to breathe through the overwhelming sensations. But it was too much, too fast, too intense. And then she felt it. A presence in her mind that was both foreign and intimately familiar. A consciousness that was not her own, but was inseparable from who she was. Her wolf, not absent, not dead, just sleeping, waiting for this exact moment to wake. The presence stretched, yawned, opened eyes that Alara could somehow see despite having her own eyes open. And those eyes were not the amber or gold or silver of normal wolves. They were white, pure, blazing white that seemed to contain its own light source. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. The transformation began without warning, and without her conscious decision to shift. One moment Alara was standing on two legs, wearing the midnight blue gown, and the next her body was contorting, reshaping itself with a violence that should have been agonizing. But somehow felt right. Felt like finally fitting into her own skin after years of wearing something too small. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles stretched and strengthened. Her senses exploded outward, suddenly able to hear heartbeats from across the clearing, to smell individual scents from each person present, to see in the darkness as clearly as if it were day. And then it was complete, and she stood on 4 legs instead of 2, covered in fur that was purest white, and seemed to glow with its own internal luminescence under the blood moon's crimson light. The clearing erupted in gasps and shouts of disbelief. Alara looked down at her paws, larger than any wolf's she had ever seen, tipped with claws that gleamed like polished ivory. She could feel the power coiled in her new form, strength that made her previous human body feel like a fragile shell. But more than the physical transformation, she could feel the connection to something ancient, something that had been sleeping in. Her bloodline for generations, waiting for the right moment to reemerge. Primordial. The word came from one of the pack elders, spoken with a mixture of awe and fear. She carries the blood of the first wolves. The white coat, the size, the power signature. It is unmistakable. The elder fell to his knees, and then another, and another, until half the clearing was kneeling before Alara's wolf form. Even some of the nobles who had looked at her with contempt hours ago were now prostrating. Themselves, recognizing what she represented. The primordials were legend, the first werewolves who had walked the earth when magic still ran thick in the world. They had been giants among their kind. Wolves whose power dwarfed even the strongest modern alphas. But they had disappeared centuries ago, their bloodline diluted through generations of intermarrying until it was believed extinct. Apparently, it was not extinct. It had just been dormant, hidden, waiting. Matthias had not knelt, but he was staring at her with an expression of such profound recognition that it made her newly awakened wolf want to go to him, to press against his side and claim him as thoroughly as he had claimed her. Before she could act on the impulse, Serafina let out a sound that was half scream, half growl. Her own transformation was instant, fueled by rage and humiliation. Her silver wolf was beautiful and deadly, smaller than Alara's primordial form, but still formidable. Her lips pulled back to reveal sharp fangs. "I will not accept this," Serafina snarled, her voice distorted by her wolf form but still clearly intelligible. "You are a fraud, a trick, some kind of witch's glamour. There is no way a worthless servant carries primordial blood." She launched herself at Alara with deadly intent, aiming for the throat in a move designed to kill rather than simply challenge. Alara's newly awakened instincts took over. She did not think, did not plan, simply moved with a speed that surprised even her. She sidestepped Serafina's attack, twisted, and caught the silver wolf by the scruff of the neck with jaws that could have crushed stone. Serafina yelped in pain and surprise as Alara threw her across the clearing with a strength that sent the silver wolf tumbling through the dirt until she crashed into one of the ancient oak trees. The impact was hard enough to shake leaves from the branches, and Serafina did not immediately rise. Enough! Matthias's command cracked through the air. Like thunder, his own alpha power radiating outward in waves that made every wolf present, including Alara, feel the instinctive urge to submit. This ritual is over. Serafina, you have attacked my mate in a sacred space. You will be escorted from the grounds, and your challenge will be addressed by the council. Guards moved forward to collect Serafina, who had shifted back to human form and was cradling what looked like a broken arm. Her face was a mask of hatred as she was led away, her eyes promising vengeance even as she was removed from the clearing. Matthias approached Alara slowly, giving her wolf time to adjust to his presence. When he was close enough, he reached out and placed his hand on her head, between her ears. The touch sent electricity racing through her entire body, the mate bond singing with rightness and completion. "Shift back," he said gently. "I know you can. Just think of your human form and let the wolf recede." It took several tries, her new instincts, fighting against the unfamiliar process. But eventually, Alara felt herself changing again. The transformation reversed, and she found herself kneeling on the ground, human once more, thankfully still clothed as the magic that governed shifting preserved modesty. Matthias removed his ceremonial robe and draped it around her shoulders, shielding her from the stares of the crowd. "Come," he said, helping her to her feet. "We have much to discuss, and you have many questions that deserve answers." He led her from the clearing, leaving the stunned and whispering crowd behind. As they walked through the moonlit gardens toward the private wing of the palace, Alara finally found her voice. "I do not understand any of this. How can I be primordial? My parents were ordinary wolves. My mother worked in the kitchens. My father was a border guard. There is nothing special about my bloodline." Matthias glanced at her, something sad flickering in his amber eyes. "Is that what they told you? That they were your parents?" The question stopped her cold. "What do you mean? Of course they are my parents." He sighed and guided her to a bench beneath a willow tree, its branches forming a curtain of privacy around them. "Alara, I have been searching for you for 3 years. Ever since I had a vision during my own ritual, a vision of a white wolf who would be my mate. I sent inquiries to every pack in every kingdom, looking for any sign of primordial bloodline. And then 6 months ago, I finally found a record. An infant girl, born to a primordial mother who died in childbirth 21 years ago, given to a childless couple to raise in secret. 21 years ago, Ilara's age exactly. Her mind reeled, trying to process what he was saying. No, that cannot be right. My parents love me. They would have told me. But even as she said it, memories began to surface. The way her mother sometimes looked at her with such sorrow. The way her father avoided her eyes when she had cried about being wolfless. The hushed conversations that stopped whenever she entered a room. They did love you, Matthias said gently. They were paid to keep you safe and hidden. Your mother, your real mother, had enemies. Powerful wolves who feared what a return of primordial blood would mean for the existing power structures. She knew she was dying, and she knew her daughter would be hunted if anyone discovered what she was. So she arranged for you to be hidden in plain sight, with your wolf bound by ancient magic until you reached maturity and found your true mate. A mate bond, Alara whispered, understanding dawning. The bond was the key to breaking the binding. Matthias nodded. When I touched you today, I felt your wolf stirring, trying to break through. And tonight, during the blood moon ritual when the magic is strongest, when I claimed you as mine, the binding shattered completely. Alara looked down at her hands, half expecting them to still be glowing with power, but they looked normal, ordinary. Except they were not, were they? She was not ordinary. She never had been. Who was she? My real mother? Pain crossed Matthias's face. Her name was Ariana. She was a primordial, the last known living descendant of the first wolves. And she was my father's mate. The world seemed to tilt again. Your father's mate. That means you are my... She could not finish the sentence. Matthias smiled, but it was tinged with sorrow. Half-brother, yes. Ariana was my father's
Chance
second.
mate.
The one he found after my mother died. I was already grown, already ruling my own territory when they met. I loved Ariana like a mother, even though she was not much older than me. She was brilliant and kind and powerful beyond measure. What happened to her? Ilara asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Childbirth complications, or so the official report said, but I have always suspected foul play. Your mother had been receiving threats, warnings that if she brought another primordial into the world, both she and the child would be eliminated. After her death, the baby, you, disappeared. I searched for years, but the trail was too cold. Until I had the vision. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was both comforting and electric. You are my mate, Ilara. That is what the moon has decreed. But you are also my sister in all but blood, and I want you to know that I will protect you, whether you choose to accept the mate bond or not. The choice. He was giving her a choice. Despite the claiming, despite the ritual, despite everything, he was offering her the option to walk away. Ilara looked at this man, this king, who had upended her entire world in the space of a single day. She thought about who she had been that morning. A nobody. A servant. Wolfless and worthless and invisible. And she thought about who she was now. Primordial. Powerful. The mate of the Alpha King. You. She said slowly. I do not know how to be a queen or a sister or a wolf. I have spent my entire life being nothing, and now you are telling me I am everything. It is too much, too fast. Matthias nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know, and I am not asking you to transform overnight. I am asking you to give us time. Time to know each other. Time to understand what this bond means. Time to learn who you really are without the lies and the binding magic. He stood and offered her his hand. You will have your own chambers in the royal wing. You will have teachers to help you understand your powers and your heritage. You will have guards to keep you safe from those who will inevitably see you as a threat. And you will have me, whenever you need me. No questions asked. Ilara looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. She could refuse. She could run, try to go back to being invisible, being small. But that life was gone now, destroyed as thoroughly as the binding magic that had hidden her wolf. There was no going back. There was only forward. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Okay, she said. Time. We can do time. The smile that broke across Matthias's face was like sunrise, transforming him from stern king to someone younger, more vulnerable. Thank you, he said simply. He led her through corridors she had cleaned 100 times, but now she walked them as something else. Not a servant. Not quite a queen. Something in between. Being defined, still. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The private chambers Matthias led her to were more luxurious than anything Ilara had ever imagined occupying. The bedroom alone was larger than the servants' quarters she had shared with 6 other girls. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in fabrics of deep blue and silver. Windows overlooked the palace gardens, and a balcony offered a view of the mountains beyond. Your belongings, such as they are, will be brought up, Matthias said, though they both knew she had almost nothing to her name. A few changes of servants' clothes, a worn book of poetry her supposed father had given her, a small carved wolf she had kept despite the pain it caused her. Rest tonight. Tomorrow. We begin your education." He turned to leave, but Alara found herself calling out to him. "Matthias." He paused in the doorway, looking back at her with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Why me? I mean, I know the moon chose, but why do you think it chose me? A girl who did not even know what she was?" Matthias was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think," he said slowly, "that the universe has a sense of balance. You spent your whole life thinking you were powerless, learning humility and compassion in ways those born to privilege never can. Now you have more power than almost anyone alive. The moon chose you because it knew you would not abuse that power, because you understand what it means to be at the bottom, to be overlooked and dismissed." He smiled, a genuine warmth in the expression. "Also, you threw Serafina 20 feet without even trying. I have wanted to do that for years, so thank you for living out my fantasies." The unexpected humor startled a laugh out of Alara, the sound rusty and unpracticed, but real. Matthias's smile widened at the sound, and then he was gone, leaving her alone in chambers that felt both like a palace and a prison. Alara moved to the window and looked out at the blood moon, still hanging heavy and red in the sky. Somewhere out there, Serafina was nursing her wounds and plotting revenge. Somewhere, there were wolves who would see Alara's emergence as a threat to be eliminated. Somewhere, the truth about her mother's death waited to be uncovered. But for now, in this moment, Alara allowed herself to simply feel. She called to her wolf, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. The white presence in her mind responded with warmth and recognition, no longer sleeping, but awake and aware. Her wolf, her power, her birthright. She thought about the girl she had been this morning, scrubbing floors and avoiding Serafina's cruelty. That girl felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. But she had been real, and her experiences had been real, and Alara would not forget her. Could not forget her, because that struggle, that pain, that feeling of being less than, it had shaped her in ways that would serve her in the days to come. She was Ilera, servant and primordial, nobody and somebody, wolfless and the most powerful wolf in generations. And she was the mate of the Alpha King, whether she was ready for it or not. The days that followed the blood moon ritual passed in a blur of revelations and training that left Alara exhausted both physically and mentally. Matthias had not been exaggerating when he promised her teachers. She woke before dawn each day to meet with Master Corvus, an ancient wolf who claimed to have known one of the last primordials before they disappeared. He taught her about her heritage, about the powers that came with her bloodline, about the responsibilities she now carried. Primordials were not just stronger and faster than ordinary wolves. They could sense lies, could influence pack bonds, could draw on the old magic that still lingered in sacred places. They were also targets, which Corvus reminded her of daily, with a grim satisfaction that suggested he enjoyed frightening her. After lessons with Corvus came combat training with Matthias's Gamma, a scarred female warrior named Kara, who had apparently promised Matthias she would not kill Ilara, but made no promises about not breaking a few bones in the process. Alara learned quickly that her primordial strength meant nothing without technique, and Kara delighted in demonstrating this fact by putting her on her back repeatedly until Alara wanted to cry from frustration. "You are stronger than me," Kara would say after each defeat, "but strength without skill is just waiting to be exploited. Again." The afternoons were reserved for etiquette lessons with Lady Iris, a stern older woman who insisted that being the king's mate meant representing the crown, and that meant knowing which fork to use at formal dinners and how to curtsy to visiting dignitaries without looking like a servant pretending to be noble. Alara hated these lessons most of all. The constant reminders that she did not belong in this world, that she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Through it all, Matthias appeared at unexpected moments. He would watch her combat training from the shadows, occasionally calling out advice that Kara would incorporate immediately. He would join her for dinner in her chambers when the formal state dinners grew too overwhelming, bringing simple food and easy conversation that felt like breathing after hours of holding her breath. He never pushed the mate bond, never demanded physical affection or intimacy, but his presence was constant, a steady, reliable force that anchored her when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. She found herself looking for him in crowded rooms, relaxing when she caught his scent, missing him when he was called away on matters of state. The bond was growing stronger, weaving itself deeper into her heart with each passing day. And she was not sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. 2 weeks after the ritual, Serafina requested an audience with the king. Alara heard about it from Kara, who made it clear she thought it was a terrible idea to allow the scorned noble anywhere near the palace. "She has already tried to kill you once," Kara said, driving home her point with a particularly vicious training move that left Alara gasping on the ground. "What makes you think she will not try again?" Matthias's response, delivered to Alara personally that evening, was calm but firm. "Serafina is the Duke's daughter. I cannot refuse her without creating a political incident. But you will be there, and so will my full guard. She will not harm you." The audience was set for the next day, to be held in the formal throne room. Alara dressed carefully, choosing a gown of deep crimson that Lady Iris had insisted brought out the undertones in her skin. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style that made her look older, more regal. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger, a beautiful stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. The throne room was already full when she arrived. Nobles and courtiers gathered to witness whatever spectacle Serafina intended to create. Matthias sat on his throne, the crown on his head, every inch the powerful king. Next to his throne, a smaller chair had been placed. Her chair. The queen's chair. Alara's steps faltered as she realized what that meant. What everyone in this room would assume when she took that seat. But Matthias's eyes found hers across the space, and the warmth in them gave her courage. She walked down the long aisle between the assembled nobles, keeping her head high, and took her place beside the king. The moment she sat, she felt the mate bond pulse with approval, with rightness, and Matthias reached over to take her hand in his. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable. A claim, a statement. She was his, and he was hers, and anyone who challenged that would answer to both of them. Serafina was announced with full ceremony, and she entered the throne room looking flawless despite her recent injury. Her arm had healed, courtesy of the rapid shifter metabolism, and she wore a gown of ice blue that complemented her silver hair perfectly. She moved with the grace of someone born to power, confident despite her recent humiliation. When she reached the base of the throne, she performed a curtsy that was technically perfect, but somehow managed to convey insolence in its execution. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "I come before you to offer my sincere apologies for my behavior during the blood moon ritual. I allowed emotion to overcome reason, and I attacked the woman you have chosen as your mate. It was inappropriate and disrespectful to both you and the sacred ceremony." The words were right, but something about the delivery felt wrong. Alara glanced at Matthias and saw that he felt it too, his expression carefully neutral, but his body tense. "I accept your apology, Lady Serafina," Matthias said formally. "Is there anything else you wish to address?" Serafina's smile was cold and perfect. "Actually, yes. I have information that I believe your Majesty will find most illuminating. Information regarding your new mate's heritage." The throne room went silent. Alara felt her heart begin to hammer in her chest. Whatever Serafina was about to reveal, it was not going to be good. "Speak," Matthias commanded, his voice hard. Serafina's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. I have been conducting my own investigation into the emergence of primordial blood in a servant girl, and I have discovered some fascinating facts. Facts that suggest Alara's parentage is not quite what you have been led to believe. She produced a rolled parchment from her sleeve and held it up. This is a birth record from 21 years ago, found in the archives of the Northern Territories. It documents the birth of a female child to Ariana of the primordial line, but it also documents the identity of the father. Matthias's hand tightened on Alara's, his entire body radiating tension. Who was the father, Seraphina? Seraphina's smile was triumphant. Duke Cassian of the North, my father. The words hit like a physical blow. Alara felt the blood drain from her face, felt the world tilt dangerously. No, that could not be right. If the Duke was her father, that meant Seraphina was her half-sister. That meant the woman who had tormented her, who had tried to kill her, was family. Matthias was on his feet in an instant, his alpha power flooding the room with such force that several of the weaker nobles actually collapsed. You are lying. His voice was death itself, cold and absolute. Seraphina did not flinch, did not back down. The records do not lie, Your Majesty. My father had an affair with Ariana before she met your father. I was 3 years old when it happened. My mother never forgave him for it, and she certainly never forgave Ariana. She turned her attention to Alara, and the look in her eyes was pure venom. All this time, you were my bastard half-sister. All this time you were proof of my father's infidelity, hidden away like the shameful secret you are. And now you have the audacity to sit beside the king, wearing jewels and silk, pretending to be something you are not. Alara found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. I did not. No, I did not know any of this. Seraphina laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. Of course you did not. Because you are exactly what I always said you were. A nobody. A servant playing at being special because she got lucky with a mate bond and some sleeping power. Matthias's hand on Alara's shoulder was gentle, despite the fury radiating from him. Even if what you say is true, Seraphina, it changes nothing. Alara is my mate. She carries primordial blood. She is under my protection and will be my queen. Seraphina's composure cracked, just a little, fury bleeding through her perfect mask. She is a bastard born of betrayal. She has no claim to anything. The council will never accept her as queen. The council will accept what I tell them to accept, Matthias said with deadly calm. And if they do not, they can find themselves a new king. Is there anything else, Lady Seraphina? Or are you quite finished trying to undermine your own half-sister? The dismissal was clear, but Seraphina was not done. There is one more thing, Your Majesty. A warning, if you will. My father knows about Alara now, and he is not pleased that his bastard has risen so high. He is coming to court, and he is bringing evidence of his own. Evidence that will prove Alara is not fit to be queen. She swept into another perfect curtsy and turned to leave, her exit as dramatic as her entrance. The moment she was gone, the throne room erupted into frantic whispers. Matthias stood, pulling Alara to her feet with him. Court is dismissed, he announced, his voice brooking no argument. Everyone out, now. The nobles scrambled to obey, filing out with backward glances and excited murmurs. Within minutes, the vast throne room was empty, except for Alara, Matthias, and his 2 most trusted guards positioned at the doors. Matthias pulled Alara into his arms, and she went willingly, burying her face in his chest as the emotions she had been holding back crashed over her like a wave. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. I did not know. I did not mean to bring shame to you. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. You have brought me no shame. Do you hear me? None. Whatever your parentage, Whatever secrets Serafina and her father want to throw at us, it does not change who you are or what you mean to me." Tears streamed down Alara's face, hot and unchecked. "I am a bastard, proof of an affair. Your father's mate was with another man, and I am the result. How can you still want me? How can you still claim me as yours?" Matthias's smile was sad but genuine. "Because the moon chose you. Because you are brave and strong and kind, despite everything life has thrown at you. Because when I look at you, I see my future, my partner, the other half of my soul." He kissed her forehead gently, the touch sending electricity through the mate bond. "And because I am falling in love with you, Alara. Scandal and all." The words hit her like a thunderbolt. Love. He was falling in love with her. This powerful, incredible man who could have anyone, who had been pursued by the most beautiful and sophisticated women in all the kingdoms, was falling in love with a servant girl who had not even known what she was 2 weeks ago. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything," he countered. "And I intend to make sure you get it." He released her and stepped back, slipping seamlessly back into the role of king. "We have work to do. If Duke Cassian is coming to court with evidence against you, we need to be prepared. I will have my researchers dig into Ariana's past, find out the truth about your conception, and I will speak with the council. Make sure they understand that challenging my choice of mate is challenging me directly." Alara wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders, calling on reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. "What do you need me to do?" Matthias's expression was fierce with pride. "I need you to be exactly who you are, strong, defiant, unbreakable. Do not let Serafina or her father make you feel small. You are primordial, Alara. You bow to no one." The words ignited something in her chest, a fire that burned away the shame and fear. He was right. She had spent too many years being small, being invisible, being worthless. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone who had thrown a noble lady 20 feet without even trying. Someone who carried the blood of the first wolves. Someone chosen by the moon itself. She was done apologizing for existing. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Matthias's researchers worked day and night, digging through old records and interviewing anyone who might have known Ariana during the time of Alara's conception. What they found was a story far more complex than Serafina's simple tale of infidelity. Ariana had indeed known Duke Cassian, but their relationship had ended badly long before she met Matthias's father, the late King Aldrich. According to witnesses, Cassian had become obsessed with Ariana, had pursued her relentlessly despite her clear rejection of his advances. When she finally met Aldrich and they discovered they were true mates, Cassian had been furious. He had spread rumors about Ariana, tried to undermine her relationship with the king, and when that failed, he had retreated to his northern territories to nurse his wounded pride. "The timeline does not work," Matthias explained to Alara over dinner in her chambers 3 nights after Serafina's revelation. "Cassian claims he had an affair with Ariana that produced you, but according to every witness we have found, Ariana was already bonded to my father by the time you would have been conceived. And mate bonds do not allow for infidelity. It is literally impossible for a bonded wolf to be with anyone other than their mate." Alara felt hope flicker in her chest for the first time in days. "So, Serafina was lying?" Matthias shook his head slowly. "Not exactly. The birth record she found is real. But I think Cassian is the one who is lying, and he has been lying for 21 years. He pulled out a different document, this one aged and yellowed. This is Ariana's personal journal, kept during her pregnancy with you. My father gave it to me after her death, and I have been reading through it, looking for anything that might help us." He opened to a marked page and began to read. "The Duke continues his harassment. Today he cornered me in the gardens and made vile accusations about my child's parentage. He claims that because he wants me, because he has always wanted me, the child must be his. as if desire alone could override the mate bond. Aldrich was furious when I told him. He wanted to challenge Cassian directly, but I begged him not to. I fear what Cassian might do if pushed too far. Alara listened, her heart pounding. He was obsessed with her, and when she rejected him for your father, he convinced himself. That I was his child? Matthias nodded grimly. It appears so. And I think when Ariana died, and you disappeared, Cassian saw an opportunity. He created false records, planted evidence that would support his claim of an affair. Perhaps he even believed it himself, convinced himself that his desire for Ariana was requited. He closed the journal carefully. But the truth is simple. Ariana was my father's true mate. You are their daughter, conceived in love and protected in death. And Cassian is a delusional man whose obsession has festered for 2 decades. Relief flooded through Alara so intense she felt lightheaded. She was not the product of an affair. She was not a bastard born of betrayal. She was the legitimate child of a king and his mate, hidden to protect her from those who would harm her. We need to prove this, she said urgently. We need to show the council and the court that Cassian is lying. Matthias smiled, and there was something dangerous in the expression. Oh, we will. In 3 days, Cassian arrives at court, and I have arranged for a very special demonstration that will prove beyond any doubt who your true father was. The day of Duke Cassian's arrival dawned gray and cold, storm clouds gathering on the horizon, as if nature itself sensed the coming confrontation. Alara, dressed in a gown of pure white, Lady Iris's choice, meant to symbolize her primordial heritage and her innocence of the accusations against her. Her hair was left loose, flowing down her back in waves that caught the light. Around her neck, Matthias had placed a necklace that had belonged to Ariana, a simple silver pendant with a stone that matched Alara's eyes. The throne room was packed when she entered, every noble and courtier who could claim a reason to attend crammed into the space. Matthias sat on his throne already, wearing his full regalia, looking every inch the supreme Alpha King. When his eyes found hers, they softened just a fraction, a private moment of connection. Before the public battle began, Alara took her place beside him, and they waited. Duke Cassian was announced with great fanfare, and he entered the throne room like a conquering hero, rather than a subject coming before his king. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and imposing, with silver hair and eyes that were unsettlingly similar to Seraphina's cold gaze. Behind him walked a procession of northern nobles, and at the rear, Seraphina herself, looking triumphant. Cassian approached the throne. With a confidence that bordered on arrogance, his bow perfunctory at best. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice deep and carrying, "I come before you regarding a matter of utmost importance, a matter of blood and birthright." Matthias leaned back in his throne, his posture deceptively relaxed. "Speak then, Duke Cassian. Tell us why you have traveled so far." Cassian's eyes slid to Alara, and she saw something in them that made her skin crawl. Possession. Obsession. The same look he must have. Turned on her mother all those years ago. 21 years ago, I had an affair with Ariana of the primordial line. The result of that union was a daughter who now sits beside you, wearing the jewels of a queen, when she should be recognized as my bastard. The assembled nobles erupted in whispers. Matthias held up a hand for silence. "You claim Alara is your daughter. What proof do you offer?" Cassian produced the same birth record Seraphina had shown, along with several other documents. These records show that I was in the royal city during the time of conception. They show that I had access to Ariana, and they show that I acknowledged the child as mine when she was born. Matthias examined the documents with apparent care, though Alara knew he had already seen them all. "These records could be fabricated," he said mildly. "Do you have any other proof?" Cassian's smile was smug. "I have testimony from servants who saw Ariana and me together. I have letters she..." allegedly wrote to me, though I suspect these were forged by someone else trying to protect her reputation. And I have this." He held up a small vial containing what looked like blood. "My blood, which I am willing to have tested against the girls. Blood does not lie, Your Majesty. It will prove she is mine." The blood test was an old magic, rarely used because it required a powerful witch and considerable resources. But it was considered infallible. If Cassian's blood matched Alara's, it would prove kinship beyond any doubt. Matthias looked at Alara, a question in his eyes. She nodded, understanding what he was asking. She was willing to undergo the test, because she knew what it would show. Cassian was not her father. He could not be. "Very well," Matthias said. "We will conduct the blood test. But not just with your blood, Duke Cassian." He stood and descended from the throne, moving to an ornate box that sat on a pedestal near the dais. Opening it carefully, he removed a vial of his own, this one containing blood so old it had turned nearly black. "This," he announced to the assembled court, "is blood from my father, King Aldrich, preserved at the time of his death according to our traditions. We will test Alara's blood against both samples. If she is Cassian's daughter, his blood will react. If she is my father's daughter, this blood will react." Cassian's confidence faltered, just for a moment. Clearly he had not anticipated this. "That is unnecessary, Your Majesty. My blood will prove my claim." Matthias's smile was all teeth. "Then you should have no objection to a comprehensive test." The court witch was summoned, an ancient woman named Morgana, who was said to be the most powerful magic user in all the kingdoms. She took the samples from both men and then approached Alara with a small, sharp blade. "Your finger, child," she said, her voice crackling with age. Alara held out her hand, barely flinching as Morgana drew blood and collected it in a crystal vial. The witch moved to the center of the throne room, where a circle had been inscribed in the floor with silver. She placed all 3 vials within the circle and began to chant in the old language, the words resonating with power that made the air itself vibrate. The blood in the vials began to glow, responding to the magic. Morgana added Cassian's blood to Alara's vial first, and they all watched, waiting. Nothing happened. The blood remained inert, 2 separate substances that refused to combine. Cassian's face went white. "That cannot be right. Test it again." Morgana ignored him, and instead added Aldrich's ancient blood to Alara's sample. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. The 2 bloods merged, swirling together and emitting a brilliant white light that filled the entire throne room. The light was so bright that people had to shield their eyes. And when it finally faded, the combined blood in the vial had turned pure silver, the color of primordial bloodline acknowledged and confirmed. "Alara is the daughter of King Aldrich and Ariana," Morgana announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The blood has spoken. There is no doubt." The throne room exploded in shocked exclamations and frantic conversation. Cassian stood frozen, his carefully constructed lie shattered in front of everyone. Serafina looked like she might be sick, her face pale and her hands trembling. Matthias returned to his throne, pulling Alara up to stand beside him. "Duke Cassian," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You have made false claims against my mate. You have attempted to undermine her legitimacy with lies and fabricated evidence. You have dishonored the memory of my father's mate with your obsession." Cassian fell to his knees, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "Your Majesty, I believed it was true. I convinced myself." Matthias held up a hand, silencing him. "Whether you believed your own lies or not is irrelevant. You have committed treason by attempting to delegitimize the king's mate. The penalty for such treason is death." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Alara felt her heart jump into her throat. Death seemed excessive, despite what Cassian had done. She looked at Matthias, trying to read his expression, and saw not cruelty, but calculation. However, Matthias continued, his tone slightly softer. I am willing to show mercy. Cassian, you will forfeit your title of Duke. Your lands and holdings will be placed under royal stewardship. You will retire to a monastery in the eastern mountains and live out your days in contemplation of your sins. This is not a negotiation. This is the only alternative to execution. Cassian's face crumpled, the last of his arrogance draining away. I accept, Your Majesty. Thank you for your mercy. Matthias turned his attention to Seraphina, who stood among her father's retinue, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Lady Seraphina, you brought false accusations to this court. You attempted to shame and humiliate the woman who is now proven to be a princess of the royal blood. What do you have to say for yourself? Seraphina's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. I was deceived by my father, Your Majesty. I believed his lies because he was my father, and I trusted him. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. It was a better apology than Alara had expected, and she found herself speaking before she consciously decided to. She was trying to protect what she thought was her birthright, Matthias. She was cruel, yes, but she was also defending what she believed was rightfully hers. The throne room went silent. Matthias looked at Alara with surprise, and something that might have been pride. You would speak in her defense. After everything she has done to you? Alara met Seraphina's eyes across the distance. I know what it feels like to be powerless. I know what it feels like to fight for the scraps of dignity you can find. If I had been in her position, believing my father's lies, I might have done the same. It was not forgiveness, exactly, but it was understanding, and perhaps that was more valuable. Matthias considered for a long moment before nodding. Very well. Seraphina, you will return to your family's reduced holdings. You will make no further claims against Alara or attempt to undermine her position. If you can learn to live peacefully with the new order of things, you may one day be welcome back at court, but that day is not today. Seraphina curtsied deeply, and when she rose, there were tears on her cheeks. Thank you, Your Majesty, and thank you, Princess Alara. I do not deserve your mercy. She left with her father. Both of them diminished, broken versions of the people who had entered with such confidence. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The throne. Room slowly emptied, nobles departing with much to discuss and gossip about. Soon, only Alara and Matthias remained, alone in the vast space. Matthias descended from his throne and pulled Alara into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. You were magnificent, he whispered into her hair. Brave and merciful, and every inch a queen. Alara pulled back just enough to look up at him. I am not a queen yet. His smile was slow and heated, making her heart race. Remedy that. Then let me. He dropped to one knee before her, there in the empty throne room with no witnesses but the ancestral portraits on the walls. From his pocket, he produced a ring, simple silver with a stone that glowed with the same white light as her wolf. Alara, daughter of Aldrich and Ariana, carrier of primordial blood, my true mate and the other half of my soul, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, my partner, my queen? Tears streamed down Alara's face, but these were tears of joy, of overwhelming emotion that threatened to burst from her chest. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and the moment it settled into place, she felt the mate bond surge with such intensity that her knees buckled. Matthias caught her, standing and pulling her against him in one smooth motion. And then he was kissing her, really kissing her for the first time, and it was like coming home and setting fire to the world all at once. His Lips were warm and demanding against hers, his hands tangling in her hair as he claimed her mouth with a thoroughness that left no doubt about his feelings. She kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring everything she felt into the connection between them. Love and desire and gratitude and hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Matthias rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Alara. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you on your knees in the great hall, covered in wine and still trying to maintain your dignity." Alara laughed, the sound bright and free. "I love you too. I think I started falling the moment you told Serafina to stand down. Nobody had ever defended me before." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the mate bond singing between them with contentment and promise. The wedding was held 3 weeks later, a spectacle that brought nobles from all 7 kingdoms to witness the Alpha King marry his primordial mate. Alara wore a gown of white and silver that seemed to capture starlight itself, and when she walked down the aisle toward Matthias, she saw only him. Not the crowd, not the pageantry, just the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had loved her when she was worthless, who had given her the courage to claim her birthright. The ceremony was conducted under the light of a full moon, and when the priestess asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute. When Matthias placed the crown on her head, making her officially queen, Alara felt her wolf surge with pride and power. She was no longer the servant girl scrubbing floors. She was Queen Alara, primordial, mate of the Alpha King, and she was finally, completely, irrevocably home. The celebration lasted 3 days, but the real party began when Matthias finally carried her over the threshold of their shared chambers, his eyes dark with desire and love. As he laid her down on their bed and began to show her exactly how much she meant to him, Alara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From nothing to everything. From invisible to unforgettable. From wolfless to the most powerful wolf alive. And as Matthias's lips found hers once more, as the mate bond flared with completion and belonging, Alara knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain, every humiliation, every tear had been worth it, because they had led her here, to him, to love, to destiny. The moon hung heavy and full outside their window, bathing them in silver light, bearing witness as the Alpha King and his primordial queen finally, completely, claimed each other. And somewhere in the ancient magic that bound all wolves together, the spirits of Aldrich and Ariana watched their daughter find the happiness they had fought so hard to protect, the love they had died to preserve. She was their legacy, their hope, their triumph, and she was finally free.